I'm Krista Case, Principal Analyst for Cybersecurity and Resilience here at the Cube Research. I'm fresh off the road from New York City this week, where I attended SailPoint's Agentic Fabric launch and VeeamON 2026. And I wanted to spend a few minutes today and take you through kind of a recap and some reflections from these events, because they demonstrated two really important macro shifts in our industry. The first is that we need to prepare for a reality that's coming where AI agents will become operational actors inside the enterprise, making meaningful contributions to business functions on a daily basis. And the second piece of this trend is that as this happens, we're going to have new requirements for identity, governance, resilience, and recovery. And this is because traditional controls and protection were built for human interactions. But in this autonomous or even semi-autonomous world, interactions of agents with data, infrastructure, workloads, and even other agents create, again, whole new requirements. So we need to have a shift from protecting users to being able to protect decisions and actions, as well as machine-generated outcomes. And this is what SailPoint and Veeam both talked about this week. We also have this really interesting convergence between identity governance and cyber resilience around the ability to enable trust of data and actions in this AI era. The big challenges that I think customers are going to face are the ability to be able to understand which AI systems took action, what data influenced them, and can we trace, govern, and potentially recover from those actions, again, as we move into this autonomous world. So looking first at the SailPoint launch, they announced a number of capabilities for managing and securing autonomous AI agents from an identity governance perspective. Again, they call this their agentic fabric. At the event, they emphasized visibility, accountability, access governance, and lifecycle management for AI agents. And this all matters because machine identities will vastly outnumber human identities. SailPoint projected that AI agents could outnumber human workers by a ratio of 100 to 1 in some enterprise environments. So this really changes the speed and the scale that identity governance fabrics need to operate at. It creates new requirements around privilege management, and it also creates new behavioral analytics requirements and new concerns around compliance and auditability. This is all because we're seeing that AI agents don't fit neatly into existing identity and access management models. So these AI agents are chaining actions together, they're inheriting permissions, they're going to start interacting autonomously with data and with other agents, and they're also going to be triggering secondary actions downstream. So when we think about human-centric identity governance, that's really built around deterministic control and predictable access, there will be issues that are created, such as gaps in visibility and accountability. SailPoint talked a lot about the need for lineage around AI actions for accountability and auditability. We'll also see issues in areas like entitlement sprawl. So I do think that SailPoint is spot on in its direction. And I think they have traction in enterprises and in identity governance that will help them to solve some of these problems. But one of the big questions that remains is whether enterprises will be able to adapt their policies and their procedures quickly enough in order to be able to support the new governance models that are required to safely adopt autonomous AI agents. Now, looking at the next event, VeeamON, Veeam is trying to create a new category around AI resilience and data trust infrastructure. They're positioning backup and recovery as the operational trust layer for AI systems. I do think that Veeam is very spot on with this. when we think about, again, kind of that operational trust layer, I think data really sits at the heart of it. And what's interesting, I've been tracking Veeam for many years now. They've been really evolving from their roots in backup and recovery into resilience. And this is the biggest swing that I've seen them take, not only around resilience, but they're also making a big push into data and AI trust as well. So very interesting to see. Now, thinking even beyond Veeam, when we think about how this market is evolving and the role of data protection and resilience in the AI era, there are really two sides to this conversation. The first is that AI systems are only as trustworthy as the data that is feeding them. We think about things like data poisoning, corrupted vector databases that are feeding AI applications, and the potential for AI agents to be autonomously taking action based on bad decisions that were formed by bad or tampered data. So this creates a strong need to protect the data that's feeding these AI pipelines, and also the ability to roll back AI-driven changes that were potentially malicious or simply even incorrect. So with that in mind, recovery now has to include context, lineage, and validation. And this is really a big move for this market as a whole, because ultimately it is also going to have to factor in knowledge around business processes. And again, a really big move potentially for this market in really sort of thinking about the structure and that cyber resilience companies will be able to put around this. Veeam sort of at its event this week, it threw its hat in the ring around resilience operations. And this is a term, that we've been hearing for several months now. And to me, it really means evolving beyond manual execution of recovery operations, and instead moving towards operations that are AI assisted and context aware for resiliency. So, for example, when I think about remediation and recovery, it's not going to be fully autonomous. We're certainly not there yet, but this ResOps space certainly needs to deliver things like the ability to prioritize recovery operations and help to orchestrate them, support decision making around this prioritization with context around, data sensitivity and its relevancy to the business, for example. And also be able to provide recovery workloads that are faster and really kind of more precision based, depending on potentially what was impacted during a breach, for example. So I sort of alluded to this, but it really evolves this space beyond simply backup and recoveries to becoming more of an intelligent decision layer. And this is especially important in these AI-driven environments because we need to be able to recover operational states and workflows. And again, I think leaning over my skis a little bit, I think this is, again, really where this market is heading. So taking a step back and reflecting on these two events that I attended this week, there's a connecting thread between identity and data and resilience. And there's a need for some convergence or at least some intersection points between these three spaces. And this is because enterprises require these trusted identities and these trusted data to be able to do two things. The first is to be able to trust the actions that their AI applications and agents are going to be taking, but also to be able to have confidence in provable recovery and auditability as well. So again, I really think what made this week interesting was the fact that these events reflected that cybersecurity and cyber resilience architectures are moving closer together and they're entering a post-human phase. So they need to be re-architected for these dynamic and autonomous interactions between identities, data, and AI-driven actions. So SailPoint is going to be focusing on governing AI identities and autonomous agents. They're going to be focusing on controlling access and actions that AI agents are taking. And they're going to be focusing on adapting governance models for these non-human actors. Veeam, on the other hand, is going to be focusing on trusted data, recovery orchestration, and the ability to provide resilience for AI-driven operations and workflows. So two spaces, but they both point to this challenge that enterprises need to be able to understand, govern, and recover from AI-generated actions. For practitioners, we see a number of roles coming to the table here, whether they be on the traditional security side, whether they be on the traditional IT side. We certainly see other roles such as, data owners, roles in compliance as well, starting to come to the table. And I think the takeaway for practitioners is the ability to establish this visibility, accountability, lineage, and recoverability, these kind of important areas across these AI estates becomes important before these AI agents are moved into production and become embedded in business operations, because again, it provides the guardrails that are needed to be able to trust these actions and retain data privacy and security, and also be able to potentially roll back in the event of, an erroneous or malicious action, or in the event of a data breach. So that's what I've got for you today. Please reach out with comments or questions. I certainly would love to kind of engage in this conversation with you all. Again, I'm Krista Case, Principal Analyst for Cybersecurity and Resilience here at theCUBE Research. And I really look forward to the next conversation. So please stay tuned.